This is my first training session with Bolt, a reactive rescue dog. The only tools we're using are a prong collar, a leash, and then my body. Bolt has never worn a prong collar before, and this is my process for both introducing a prong collar for the first time and starting to teach a dog how to follow the leader. The way we train, anytime a dog moves out and away from us, the leash pressure is going to turn on. When that happens, we don't give into that leash pressure. Instead, we plant ourselves and allow the dog to move into us to turn the pressure off, like shown here. We want to use very little force and let the dog do most of the work. Dogs learn from the release of pressure, not pressure itself. So anytime Bolt gets to the end of the leash and he starts to put that tension on and you see the leash get tight, I just stop, plant myself, and wait for him to turn into me to turn that pressure off. Notice how I'm not popping the prong collar. I'm only allowing Bolt to reach the end of the leash and then planting myself until he turns back into me. And this is the process. We go back and forth. Every time he moves past me, I plant myself and wait for him to come back. And it's not until he's moving with me and staying with me that I can start then to teach the follow the leader. But first I have to teach him just to keep this leash pressure off so that he knows what to do when he feels it. This is the first step to introducing a prong collar with a new dog and teaching them follow the leader in that same session. There's no sound in this video because the audio was messed up at the session that I was doing. But when you watch it, you can see, again, anytime he moves out and away from me, I just plant myself and I extend my arm to give him the leash, right? I'm not yanking it. I'm not popping it. I'm just allowing him to move to the end of it and to keep going back and forth. And all I do is stay here. Anytime he's near me, that leash pressure turns off, and dogs naturally seek to be free of pressure. So what he's naturally going to do is start to stay near me. You can see he's not shooting out and away nearly as much, and it's easier to engage him then. And so right there, I gave him a prong pop for jumping because he's been really fussy with the leash. When I first got to this session, he was jumping all over me and biting on me. And so I wanted to set that boundary with him really quickly that is not something you're going to do with me, even though I invite you up onto me. And so now that I've introduced this little prong pop, I can start to use that now as I need to create a little bit more pressure when he's fussing with the leash. So you'll probably start to see me do that now, where anytime he puts his mouth on the leash, I'm going to give that little wrist flick to encourage him to let it go. But I'm not going to be overwhelmingly forceful. I'm not going to put a ton of pressure on the dog. I'm going to give him the leash and let him do the work. I really want dogs to figure this out for themselves because, again, dogs learn from the release of pressure, not the pressure itself. The first time you take control of a really difficult dog or a dog that's been overwhelmingly reactive aggressive or allowed to practice really anxious behavior, the first time that you take control of them, even in this really subtle, gentle way, again, he's just wearing a certain collar. That collar protects his trachea so he can't choke on the leash, flat collars and slip leads, the way the dogs choke on them. This prevents that. That's the only difference with the prong collar, right? Unless I'm popping it, it doesn't have any particular aversive effect. When we are walking and he gets nasty and he gets fussy like this, the prong collar starts putting its own pressure on the leash And it's just in these moments that it's so important that we stay calm, we take a deep breath, and we just allow the leash to do the work for us, right? You can see I'm just continuing to move back and forth really calmly and gently. I'm not overwhelmingly being physical with him. He's really just protesting this control, right? He really just doesn't like that he's being confined and isn't allowed to run around. He's not allowed to be reactive, and this is the first time in this dog's life that he's ever not been able to do that. So when we start taking away choices from dogs, they're going to start practicing and looking for other options, right? Other ways to project that frustration and release that tension. And it's up to us to just stay calm and confident while we work the dog through that and allow them to just work through it on their own. The reason we introduce muzzle training before this is because if you expect your dog to be difficult, if you have a dog that's really comfortable using its teeth, it can be really advantageous to just put a muzzle on them before this session so that they can't bite redirect onto you if they get frustrated. At several points in this session, I'm slowing down even right here in this session with this dog because when I showed up, he was comfortable using his mouth. I chose not to muzzle him. And so now my choice is that anytime he puts his teeth on me or puts his paws on me, he's getting a prong pop. But I also have to then be prepared to deal with the quote unquote fallout of him looking for other options then, right? It will get worse before it gets better because I'm taking away the choices he has as he's making choices. So then he tries new choices. And it's not until he makes a good choice to, again, move into me, the thing we taught him to do first, default to the thing you know how to do, turn the pressure off, don't try and bite me, don't jump on me. These are the basic boundaries, basically. And as long as you start to move with me and you start to accommodate these boundaries, right, we will start to have a much more comfortable walk. But it can look like this up front where it gets worse before it gets better simply because you've never taken control of your dog before. And now you're doing this the first time for yourself, and they're not expecting this from you. They don't expect you to follow through like this. You can see he keeps trying to back out. He keeps trying to back out. He keeps trying to protest, jump around, bite the leash, sit down. All of these options, though, are being met with this steady, fair pressure, right? And he's creating all of that pressure on his own because I'm just standing there holding a leash. Again, right? I'm not aggressively popping him around and being physical with him. This is him putting pressure on the leash and me just staying calm, comfortable, and confident while I hold the leash and don't give in, right? It's up to him to turn that pressure off, not up to me. And so anytime he turns that tension on, all I do is keep it on until he moves into me to turn it off. And there's times where he moves into me and it looks a lot like him jumping near me, right, just to get it off. That's cool, as long as his paws don't come up on me, which is why we encouraged him around the 3-minute mark. I encouraged him to jump on me, and then I corrected him for it. And that's why he's jumping around me. He's not jumping on me again, because we've set some boundaries. So you can start to see this all piece by piece comes together, right? And again, this is a very long video, 45 minutes or so beginning to end. We're not even 10 minutes in. It gets worse before it gets better. You can expect that with about 50% of dogs. About half of the dogs I've worked with over the last 2 years have gotten worse like this before they get easier. So it's something you can expect when you're working with your dog, that it's a 50-50 chance that this is going to be super easy and you're not going to see all of this mess, or you will. And again, in these moments, it's up to you to stay calm and follow through. You keep the leash tension on. You can see I'm holding the leash steady, even though he's like frozen here and he wants to back out of it, and I'm just not letting him. He gets one choice to turn that pressure off, and I'm going to make sure that I'm consistent with it so he can learn. Dogs only learn from the release of pressure, not the pressure itself. There's no learning in that moment where he's standing still and the leash pressure's on. He's not learning anything until he's made the decision to move forward and the pressure turns off. I apologize, a little bit off camera here. And I'm just talking to the owners who are behind the camera, coaching them on all of this same skills and handling, right? Deep breaths, follow through. He turns off the leash tension, not you. He turns off the leash pressure, not you. Right? It can get messy before it gets really good. It gets worse before it gets better. And it's so important, though, to just take those deep breaths. Trust the process. And you can, because you know how this ends. You've seen the end result of this already on my social media. And or you can even skip ahead if you're watching this on YouTube now. But you'll see this starts to smooth out pretty nicely around 15 or so minutes, I think it is, if I recall correctly. Because I know around 30 minutes or so, we bring mom and dad in so that they can practice with him. And I bring Savannah out. So you can see too, I'm just being super calm and super consistent. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to stop having this expectation. I'm not going to make it easier for him. I'm just going to continue to walk, and he has to come with me. Right? Now we're getting to the follow the leader part of this with this dog. And I'm walking back and forth on this sidewalk, and he has to come with me. When he feels that leash tension, it's up to him to turn it off. And no, you're not allowed to jump on me, and no, you're not allowed to bite me. Super simple rules of the game. You keep it really simple up front, and they get it really quickly. But it can feel really messy up front. You can see he's kind of like tucked behind me, so I'm like holding leash and waiting for him to move around. There we go. And let's say he did go for me. Let's say he tried to bite me. I would give a nice prong pop. Just like I did when I encouraged him to jump up on me and I gave him that little bit of a prong pop. And the one thing I'm really not letting him do is switch sides, right? Up front, he was really wrapping around behind me a lot. And now I've really stopped that. You see I have the leash anchored on my left, and I'm holding him, the end nearest to him, with my right. Anytime he tries to wrap around me like that, I just pull out with my right. I pull him out from there, so he cannot wrap behind me. He has to stay next to me. He has to stay on my right, just behind me. He can't swing over on the left. And that was a little prong pop because now I'm starting to hold him a little bit more accountable. As I can see he gets comfortable, I'm going to increase the ante and increase my expectation. As he knows how to keep pressure off, now I can introduce no sniffing, no displacement sniffing. Dogs don't need to be sniffing on the walk, tracking their triggers, getting all aroused and excited and being disengaged from you. We want reactive dogs to be in follow mode, and they can't do that with their nose to the ground. So anytime he starts sniffing, I'm going to give a little prong pop. And you can see it gets real difficult, and I just follow through. I stay really consistent. Right? You can lash out like that, but there's going to be pressure to meet that, and you're not allowed to jump on me and bite me. Just basic rules of the game still. really up to us to set the tone for our dogs. If we want them to follow us calmly, it's really up to us to be calm when we teach this, even if it gets messy. As you can see, he starts to mirror my energy too as he's surrendering into it, as he's following, as he's getting it. Right? If I was really excited and hype, he would be much more, right? He would start mirroring my energy. He'd be moving with me. But now he's just moving with me at this nice, calm, steady pace. And again, there's these little tiny moments where he pauses or he protests, and I just follow through. I keep the leash pressure on. I give him a little prong pop. Nothing overwhelming, though. He's really doing all of the work and creating all of that pressure. Because when he walks nice and next to me, there is no pressure. You can see that leash is loose, right? It's not a loop. There's not like a J shape, but we don't need a J shape. He doesn't need that much leash, right? He only needs enough leash to be exactly where he needs to be. And when he's in that spot, there should be no leash pressure. So it's up to us to just be aware of that spot just behind us, not next to us, just behind us, as much as possible. You can see he's not really next to me. He's hanging back just slightly behind me. And that's what we want. And anytime he protests or fusses or pauses or hesitates or like any of that, just a little bit of pressure from the leash. A little is all it takes. If you get really heavy-handed with this, you can expect that your dog is going to need a lot of heavy-handedness, and you can expect that they're going to build tolerance to that too. So we don't want to be prong popping all the time, because we want to be able to use our prong collars for, positive and negative reinforcement. Tools aren't inherently bad unless you're using them just for corrections, and you can, as like we use them here, we use them mostly for safety. So the goal is not to just be using a prong collar for popping all the time, and it's not that we eliminate the prong collar as soon as they're walking nicely on leash. No, this is Bolt's new collar. This is the collar he's going to wear until a point in the future where he no longer, like owners no longer feel like that has any value whatsoever, kind of thing. But in this case, for the foreseeable future, right, that's not where we're at. So we want to be able to use our leashes as a communication tool and as a guide. And so we can't be using the thing the leash is attached to like just for punishment or just for corrections. We have to use it with balance, right? We want it to be equally weighted between a neutral value, positive and negative, right? Meaning the way we're using it to either reward, ignore, or correct dogs. When we use tools with this triangular style of balance, right? It's not all good, it's not all bad, it's not all positive, it's not all negative. There's neutrality built into it. You start to see a dog's mindset shift so much faster. That's where they get to really relax into and surrender into the parasympathetic state. You can see he's giving me some really nice engagement actually all of the sudden. Even though there's these little bits of protest, all of a sudden now he's like, oh, okay, I guess we're walking together. And I was right, we're 15 to 20 minutes in. He's like, okay, this isn't so bad. And now you can see here, he's really trying to like stay with me. He's like, okay, where's she going? I want to stay with her. I don't want to fight her on this anymore. I was able to shorten, you see I shortened my leash on the right side. So I'm not holding it with two hands anymore, which means as a trainer and handler, I felt really confident in this moment that the hard part was probably over, or over enough that I could, one arm it while also maintaining a conversation. Just to iterate, how quickly you can move through this, right? And just have really easy control. And he just got a little prong pop there. I just wrist flicked up when he went after the leash and kind of started to come up it. And now anytime he goes after the leash, I'm gonna give that feedback. I'm going to be really clear because these are a bunch of triggers too over across the street. And so we don't allow dogs to stare at triggers, and that expectation begins on day one. So anytime he starts staring at triggers for more than 2 seconds, I'm going to give a little bit of feedback, a little reminder on the prong collar, or I'm going to cut him off when we're walking or turn so that he has to either go with me or he gets a reminder of what he's supposed to be paying attention to. And this time the pressure's just on, so I'm just allowing him to turn it off on his own. The trigger isn't present anymore, so now this is just disengagement like it was. You're going to go through phases with your dog where, you know, we've only been working on this with him for the first time for 20 minutes. And then 3 triggers presented themselves. So now that's a little bit of, we have to take a small step back and work through that. But that's what working through it looks like, right? Some little reminders, some leash work, right? Using your tools to really speak for you. I'm not really talking to Bolt at all in these moments either. I'm talking to his parents, who are again behind the camera. The most I'm saying to Bolt is the word "let's go." That's all I would be saying to him. I would be encouraging him to let's go and move with me, because that's the command that I use for movement. I wouldn't name this heel necessarily unless a client wanted it to be called that. With my dogs, I call this let's go, and the position that they're expected to be in is heel, right? But I teach it this way where there's this nice follow the leader, so the position is implied behind me. So you can say let's go, you can say heel, you can say whatever you want, really. But you're only going to say it once, or, over the course of, it's now 22 minutes. Over the course of this time, I've probably said let's go probably 5 times. I don't really say it after the first time. I just show the dog what I want them to do, and then I start ignoring them. You can see I'm not overwhelmingly talking to him. I'm just talking to his parents and explaining things to his parents. And Bolt is learning just to walk with me. All right, this is my walk. He's just kind of there with me for it. So that we can get this nice, dialed in, follow the leader. And we can actually fast forward the video about 3 minutes or 4 minutes. I'm not going to cut this part because I don't want there to be any edits. I don't want you to think that I've cut anything out and you need to wonder what I'm doing in between cuts. So I'm not going to cut this part out, but I don't know what I was talking about or explaining. So there's nothing for me to voice over for 3 minutes. So I'll see you in a couple minutes. Just fast forward your YouTube recording forward a few minutes. There we go. We're moving again. And now here in a minute, I'm going to hand off Bolt to Mom. I'm going to bring Savannah out, and we're going to go through a leadership handoff where I show Bolt what's not acceptable behavior when it comes to dogs, his biggest trigger. And then I show Mom and Dad how to walk him in the presence of dogs. Bolt gets a little crazy right when Savannah gets brought out of the car. Only this time he's on the prong collar. And I gave him a really nice prong pop right there. You saw my little wrist flick, my little arm movement. You might have to go back a few seconds, but I gave him a nice prong pop for thinking about locking and loading on the dog, for staring at the dog and disengaging with me long enough to create that leash pressure. If a dog disengages long enough to create leash pressure, that merits a correction. If they can't keep moving, then they deserve a correction. All of this behavior, thinking about triggers, behaving, reacting to triggers, that all feels really good for dogs. Behavior is self-rewarding. So if we want behavior to stop, we have to add a layer of discomfort over it to bring our dog's awareness to it. Because again, natural default instinctive behavior feels good for a dog. So if we want it to stop, we need to give them a reason to stop it. So again, nothing crazy, just a nice little prong pop. And then Mom shows up and Bolt gets really aroused again because Mom has historically represented a point of weakness in leadership. And so the second that Mom was in the picture at the end of the leash, Bolt immediately became disengaged and aroused and really kind of frantic. And we were almost kind of back at square one. And so we had to work through this owner association where he got several big corrections for trying to take advantage of the situation. And I had Mom let go and step away so that I could correct him fully with, having full leash available to me, basically. And then we resume. But as soon as Mom has always historically been this point of weakness in leadership because she didn't know any better, because her trainer hadn't showed her any better. And this is her first time really taking control of Bolt. So like I said earlier, dogs get worse before they get better, or at least 50% of them do. And I fully expected this from Bolt. I don't actually always do leadership handoff exactly like that, but I fully expected Bolt to become aroused and regress almost immediately with Mom taking the leash because of how bad it was when I arrived and he was at the end of the leash, because he's going to immediately default into whatever behavior and attitude is allowed or was allowed the last time she was holding the leash. So this leadership handoff is about leash handling, yes, and her getting comfortable holding a leash, but also like her giving quick corrections and learning how to prong pop really quickly, and almost effectively shattering Bolt's expectation of her and what he thought she represented up until this point. So Bolt's looking really good. And now I go and get Savannah so that we can start bringing her closer in and start working him a little bit closer. Oh, I guess not yet. So Bolt is looking really good here now. And I can go get Savannah to bring her in closer to start working them at closer range. She's just across the street. I'm going to start walking her up and down the middle of the street and progressively get her over to the sidewalk so that Mom can learn how to walk Bolt, in close proximity within 6 feet of a dog. And you can see Mom gave him a small reminder prong pop when he got disengaged for the car passing. And you can see Mom's doing a really good job at giving him a lot of feedback. Anytime he gets too hype or distracted or disengaged, or he tries to stare or he tries to sniff, she's being really on top of him right now, giving him little pops for not staying with her. And this is where I've said before, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. If you've seen any of my content, you maybe have seen this from me. I'm the trainer that says it doesn't matter what's going on around you. It doesn't matter what dogs are around you. It matters what your expectations of your dog are. Your dog is your problem, nobody else's. So it doesn't matter that another dog is across the street or another dog is on the same sidewalk as you. Your dog should have certain boundaries for behavior and expectations for behavior that they know that you will uphold. And that's what Bolt is learning here, that it doesn't matter that there's a dog in the street. It doesn't matter that there's a dog, in his territory. It doesn't matter that there's a dog nearby. It doesn't matter if he wants to play with a dog. His job is to follow Mom and to stay with Mom. And so Mom is going to be really consistent and follow through with what she expects of Bolt. And it doesn't matter what Savannah and I are doing. And now they're going to switch off and Dad's going to try. We love involved dog dads. And the process is literally exactly the same. Back and forth in front of the trigger. Expectation of stay calm with me. No, fussing, fidgeting, displacement sniffing, no jumping, no biting. Just stay with me and keep the leash pressure off. That is the dog's only job. It doesn't matter what's going on around us. Just focus on the job that I'm giving you to do.